All right. I think we're recording, right, Josh?
Yes, we are.
All right. Welcome, Josh Adelsberg, to the Coachful Coaching Leadership Podcast. How you doing today, sir?
Doing good. Actually recovering from a week of a cold with 3 kids under 3. I feel like every other week I'm catching something from daycare. So I got my water here, making sure I'm drinking my gallon a day, keeps me honest with where I'm supposed to be. So feeling good, ready to record, and appreciate you inviting me on here.
That's an interesting bottle. So we're just talking about the Josh's water bottle right before this. Can you show it to the camera? Like, it actually tells you how much you should be drinking, right? Remember your goal. Okay, never give up. All right. Okay, so free advertising for this company, right?
Absolutely.
Make sure you get some commissions on this, okay, buddy?
I'll be sending them. I think it's Go Bees. I'll be sending them a clip of this.
Okay, Go Bees. All right, sir. Well, hey, maybe tell the folks on in the audience who you are and what do you do, and you're a leader.
Yeah.
So let's start there.
Absolutely. So again, happy to be here, Dave. Thanks for inviting me on this. For everyone that just tuned in, my name's Josh Adelsberg. I am a RVP, or first line people leader at Salesforce. I've been with Salesforce going on 8 years, where I really began my career. I've had the fortunate opportunity to be within our healthcare and life sciences division for the entire time. Worked closely actually with Dave and his team of SEs over a number of years. Outside of that, I'm out of land and build our dream house that we just moved into roughly 6 months ago.
Oh, so you have a plot of land. Any animals there?
We see deer almost every morning. My loves the deer. We saw a turkey actually running through the front lawn the other day. Lots of rabbits, lots of deer. Haven't seen the turkey again, but I'm sure we'll run into some more. And there's always coyote warnings at night, which is new moving out from Manhattan. You don't get many of those living in the city, but definitely a little different with that suburban life in that backyard.
Yeah, well, hopefully that turkey shows up in November, huh?
Exactly.
Awesome. Yeah, question on a lot of people's minds is how do you balance that, man? You're a dad, a husband, 3 kids, 2 of them are twins, relatively newborn, right? Yep. And you have a pretty demanding job. What are you doing to balance it out and keep yourself sane?
Yeah. So the answer is it evolves, at every step, and balance, for example, they were born late December, which is actually the end of our fiscal year, or January is the end of our fiscal year. And so, it was a lot of taking phone calls while giving bottles, a lot of, holding maybe 1 or 2 at a time while on meetings, and finding opportunities where I could multitask and lend a hand to my wife or any other family member that was helping us. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of sleepless hours, and so while everyone else might have been sleeping, I was awake and logging in and cranking some work out and keeping myself organized and set up for the day, and just finding ways to be hyper productive in the hours that I did have by myself, or the hours that I did have with minimal distractions, knowing that I was going to have to do in maybe 3 to 5 hours, but most people had 8 to 10 hours a day to do. And I think just fine tuning that over time, communicating very clearly with my team and my leadership chain and those around me, what they could expect from me, what they couldn't expect from me, having those clear boundaries of when I'm available, when I'm not available, and really the best way to get a hold of me, knowing that I might not be sitting in front of my computer, but whether it's, giving them the permission to call my cell phone or to text me, or to Slack me at odd hours, where maybe prior to having all the kids, that was a no-go. They now had that permission. And so making sure they understood that.
Yeah. Setting boundaries. There's something amazing that happens when you do have children. I have 2 kids of my own, is that if you weren't good at setting boundaries, you'll hopefully get a little bit better at setting some boundaries. whether the boundaries are physical boundaries, like, hey, you can't come over at a certain time, or hey, you can't call me at a certain time, right? Or you
Yep.
can text me at any time, whatever it might be. It's so important. And it prevents burnout. That's one thing, right? But
Definitely.
also what you're saying, like expectations, that's so important
Yeah.
at any point in time. And it sounds like you've created a system for yourself that allows you to set expectations, yet hit the performance metrics that you have to hit, right?
Yeah. I think a lot of what I shared was, when they were months 1 and 2. Since then I've been on pat leave, and I'm grateful that Salesforce allows me the opportunity to really step away from the business and be focused. I think it's really difficult to be focused on two things at the same time and give 100% and not have that burnout. And so being able to press pause on the business, have trust in the individuals that work with me, for me, next to me, to keep things going at a certain standard, but allow me the time to be there for my family, for my wife, for my kids, and really enjoy that time. And so when I come back, in a few months, they're going to be at a different stage of their life. They'll probably be crawling, and so that evolution of balance, and where I'll have time, it may shift, but the principles will stay the same in terms of setting clear expectations and clear boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I found for myself personally, Josh, was I got better at getting the same amount of work done in a shorter period of time, because you just don't focus on the things that don't matter, right?
Yeah.
You really get really good at prioritizing. Like, out of these 10 things, what's the top 5 things that really, really matter? Whether it's
Yeah.
preparing for a presentation. Some people have an OCD. They want that pixel perfect. That box has got to line up with that word. I've known some folks like that. I don't think you were like that.
It's, saying no has to become really part of your daily
Mm,
routine, and not feeling guilty or sorry about it. And that's a hard skill for, in many cases, top performers or high performance individuals and people leaders to do, because you kind of get where you are because you say yes to a lot of things and you
yeah.
demonstrate your capabilities. But as you become a leader, a more senior leader, a more maybe managing larger teams or more responsibilities and duties, you have to say no, and you really can't do as much as you did before. And so figuring out what to say no to is definitely important, but also if you don't, you will burn out, and it won't be good for you, your family, your coworkers, your friends, your relationships. Everything sort of suffers, if you can't find a way to prioritize.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of prioritization, Josh, so when I asked you the question, what have you changed your mind on or doubled down on recently? You mentioned 2 things: relationships and rapid decision making.
Yep.
Talk about those 2 things.
Yeah. So I'll start with rapid decision making. I think it plays well into sort of just the conversation we were having. One of the things, as I've matured and I've sort of grown my network to people that are at the moment far more successful than I am, reading different books, listening to different podcasts, even things like TikTok and Instagram, which have really consumable pieces of information from entrepreneurs, very senior business leaders, things like that. This common thread of the ability to make a decision fast, they all have. And it's not just making a quick decision, it's making a really, really important, meaningful decision, like a big investment, maybe what to do with a certain stock trade, what to do with buying an investment property, how to make a certain business decision, a partnership agreement, a contract. And they just talk about the ability to make those decisions quickly, and that allows them to be more productive. And so that I used to really dwell on decisions, and I would be incredibly analytical, and I would weigh hundreds of different options, and I would stay up at night thinking about it, and I'd ultimately find my way back to the original decision I was just going to make. And so I think knowing where I'm at in my life and knowing where I want to go, that skill is something really important to me, to be able to do, and really start to kind of manifest into a daily routine.
Mm. So when you talk about making rapid decisions, and it sounds like quality is part of that as well, what's changed in how you make those rapid yet quality decisions?
Yeah, I try to simplify it as much as I can. So even down to what I might eat for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or what I'm going to wear on a certain day, and just simplifying it. People make fun of me a lot at work. I pretty much wear the same black V-neck. It's a different V-neck, but the same
We have
black
the same
color.
checker shirt, if you remember.
Exactly. And I get into these rhythms where it's easy. It's the first
Yeah.
thing in the drawer. It's easy to clean. It's easy to fold. I don't have to think about it. For breakfast, it's sort of, eating the same thing, and it changes over time, right? It's not like I'm going to eat the same thing for the next 6 months, but it eliminates decision fatigue, because if you start agonizing over the small decisions, the big ones become that much harder. So that's one thing. And then the other thing really is just like triggers that make it simple. So if this happens, this is what I'm going to do. And you sort of think about the situations before they even happen. So if I'm driving this car and I get a flat tire, I know that I'm going to go to this car place. I'm not going to spend 2 hours evaluating 5 different options and pricing it out. I'm just going to go to the closest one near the house. I'll get it taken care of. Whatever I might overpay, I'll take that risk for the time that I'm getting back in my day. And so making those things simple allows me to speed up the decision process. There's certain things that require, you have to weigh the options, you have to think about it, I talk with my wife about a lot of decisions that, regard finances and money and things that really would impact the both of us. But especially when it's just about you, I try to make those decisions as quickly as possible.
Okay. No, thanks for sharing that. And along the lines of decisions, you've also changed your mind and doubled down on relationships. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah. So relationships are tough. Friendships, personal relationships, business relationships, my own marriage, right? Relationships with your kids, your parents, things like that. And, if anything that sort of came out on the other side of the pandemic is you really kind of learned who your group was, your core group, people that were there. When you buy a house and you move out, and you're a little bit further away from everyone, and you can't just walk 2 blocks in the city, or you go through something like having a kid or twins, you really start to see who your real true friends are, and people that are there for you. And really, it becomes more about the quality of those friendships and relationships, but evaluating, are they one-sided? Are you constantly doing things, or are they constantly doing things? And making sure that you're having relationships that are mutual, that you want to be in, that you're not just sort of texting someone every 30 days and say like, hey, how are you? We should hang out, and then you never hang out, right? Like if you're going to text someone to have plans, make a plan, stick to that plan. If something comes up unforeseeable, sure, that happens, but making sure that you're committing and investing and reinvesting to those friendships and relationships. And I think as you get older, it's cliche, but it's just harder. There's less time. Everyone's busy. Everyone has something personal that they're dealing with that nobody knows about, that can get in the way. There's a lot of anxieties about hanging out in large groups these days, and, wanting to be more intimate. And so, I just think I've sort of refound the importance of finding those right relationships and having those really, enrich your life.
Yeah. The community is so important, right? At every stage in life. And sometimes it takes something significant in your life to happen, like having children. And that's significant.
Yeah.
One of, not taking away from any other significant event. It could be anything, moving to a new country, new part of the country. It really gets you to reevaluate things, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things you think about your own priorities, where you're going in life, your career, the people you hang around, right? Like,
Yep.
are they good for you? So speaking of transitions, can we transition to some of your professional background?
Definitely.
So I was looking through your LinkedIn profile, and I do want to ask you, You were a strength and conditioning coach.
I was, yes.
Okay. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, it's you don't find many tech sales people, tech sales leaders with that type of background. So it goes a little bit further back than that. I actually, I went to college to play baseball. Injuries for one reason or not didn't work out the way I had planned, but I had started as an exercise science major, but really over the time of going through that, became a little bit more passionate about business. My dad and stepdad were CFOs. All sets of grandparents, highly successful people. My grandpa on my dad's side was an entrepreneur. My grandpa on my mom's side was a lawyer. And it just sort of felt like I had lost, after I stopped playing baseball, I had lost that passion for exercise science that I once had. But shortly after graduating college, I started playing in a summer league again, and playing baseball again, and felt really sort of connected to the sport again. And an old coach that I had stayed in touch with, who was a mentor of mine, he just opened up a facility at the time. It was called 4D Sports Performance, and he's like, it's state-of-the-art technology. We have incredible equipment. It was an area in northern Westchester that was very well known for really good high school athletes across baseball, lacrosse, soccer, football, male and female athletes, that I would have an opportunity to work with. And so I didn't really know what I wanted to do after school. I knew that I needed to start making some money. And I thought maybe there was a way that this was my ticket to staying connected to sports, and pursuing, a different type of career, that I had maybe studied for in college. And so I was really there to give pitching and hitting lessons to baseball players. That was primarily what I was brought there for. But working with him and the other trainers and other conditioning coaches, we would do large clinics. We would do after school programs, for varying levels of ages. We would network with local high schools, for them to bring their teams in. We had a big indoor facility. And so in the Northeast, when it's snowing, or cold or raining, you need a place to go. And so we would bring them into our facility. We would be running clinics sort of 12, 16 hours a day. And really just working on injury prevention, speed, quickness, agility, proper techniques, to really hone in on the development of young athletes. We did have our share of pro athletes that came in and worked with some of the more elite trainers, but it was really about maturing sort of the immature, younger athlete into a high performing athlete, where everyone's goal was pretty much to either play some type of college sport, maybe make their varsity team, but everyone was a serious athlete. This wasn't just I'm going to go through the motions. Everyone was pretty competitive when it came to training.
So I'm curious, like, in my time working working alongside sales, I've noticed there's a lot of salespeople who used to be team athletes, individual athletes, very successful. Someone, D1, D2, even some semi-pro, pro players.
Yep.
Here in Canada, a lot of hockey players, ex-hockey players who play for the Leafs. I met quite a few of those walking down the aisles in the office.
Definitely.
Like, I'm curious though, like, how has that influenced in any way, like how you perform today as a leader?
Yeah, baseball and just being a competitive athlete was most of my life, before I went to college, and even, a few years after. And there's just things that you learn along the way when you play at a certain level, or you compete at a certain level, things like discipline, things like focus, intensity, just being passionate about things. Knowing your limitations, right? Finding what you're really good at and what you're not really good at, and, understanding where those gaps might be and putting a plan or a regimen in place to close those gaps. And so while if you're an athlete, or a competitor of any sort, that might be a training program, as a sales professional or a leader, it might be going to a certain professional development, a presentation skills training, and finding out what you're good at and finding out those gaps and being aware enough, self-awareness, situational awareness to know what you need to improve upon. But I also think, athletes are inspiring. They speak, or coaches are even more inspiring, right? They speak in a certain way. They bring a level of focus and energy and intention to everything that they do that I really try and emulate as a people leader, because if I, sort of boil it down, my job as a people leader is to inspire people to do the best work they can possibly do and achieve at a performance level that maybe they didn't think was possible, but through some sort of coaching and guiding and training, they were able to, and I always sort of revert back to my days of playing, coaching, or training of how do you get over that hump? How do you burst through that plateau? How do you, bring the intensity when the situation needs it, but how do you dial it back? Because you don't want to be that, that football coach that's screaming on the line, 100% of the time, right? You have to have that balance of when to be intense and when not to be, and know that not everyone was an athlete and will respond to that type of, leadership.
So how did you know you were ready for leadership?
So, I mean, specifically at Salesforce, I think it came to, I always wanted to be a leader at Salesforce from the time that I was fortunate to join the company and really work for certain leaders. I knew that that's the role I wanted to be. But I knew that I had a lot of experience I had to get before that. I knew that there were certain levels that you had to sell at before you sort of had the credibility or the brand recognition to step into a role where people would even listen to you, right? And so I knew I was ready when I had the brand that I wanted, the brand of someone that worked hard, the brand of someone that really did what they could to become an expert in the industry, in the product, the brand of someone who worked well with others and collaborated with business partners, and generally just someone who performed, and so when I had that brand, and I felt like the conversations I was having with coworkers and other leaders in the company and even outside of the company and at customers, I sort of felt like I had achieved at least the bare minimum of what I wanted to, and I was ready to take that next step and start working with others to achieve what I had and to make a bigger impact, which, you talk to any leader, one of the big things is impact. If you're an individual contributor, it's just your book of business. You can help people out. Of course, we're a team, but your impact is limited to sort of your circle. And I knew that, or what I felt is that I was ready to make that bigger impact, that I had learned the skills and I could articulate them and I could coach people to learn those same skills so we could make the biggest impact at the time across the commercial business in Salesforce and in HLS.
So it sounds like you spent a lot of time like thinking about your brand, how you wanted to show up as a leader. And it sounds like you had some data points along the way, knowing that you had that brand that you wanted to project, right?
Yes.
I guess like along the way to that journey, what's some of the coaching you've gotten, and what are some memorable coaches or coaching moments you've had along the way to becoming a leader?
Yeah, I had a lot of coaching. I was very fortunate to join Salesforce at a time where we were rapidly growing, and I didn't have a lot of sales experience. I had maybe 1.5, 2 years of sales experience. And I joined at our small business level, or emerging small business, we called it at the time. And I joined a team where my leader had been with Salesforce. I think at the time he was on year 11. And I'm Josh Gutman. And I got some really great coaching early on from him in terms of how to be operationally excellent, in the sense of running your business, being able to scale your business, how you carry yourself, how you act in front of customers, things as simple, not simple, but things as, maybe small as just what is your recap email to a customer and what does that post on-site interaction look like, to how do you prepare for an interview? How do you, have that skip level conversation? What does that AVP or senior AVP or SVP person care about. And I really learned a ton from him. It was only about a year that I worked directly for him, but so much of what I sort of carried with me throughout the years was a lot of that coaching. And then I continued to get very similar coaching from other mentors and other leaders across the business, but it was all a lot of the same of, just do the work, right? And if you do the work, good things happen. Don't complain. Don't complain. Don't blame things. Don't point fingers. Be accountable. Be authentic. A lot of the same, but everyone has their own sort of story and personal experience with it. And I think it just sticks with you as you evolve as a leader and you go through different ranks. When you hear the same thing over and over from really successful people, you sort of just have to take it and do it. And I think I've been fortunate enough to work for such great leaders that have given me that coaching.
Yeah. Yeah. The best coaches, it's about ownership, accountability, right? Stop blaming, pointing fingers around, right? This is your business. But what I appreciate about like also starting in a small business environment, they don't skip over the basics.
Yeah.
Right. And those basics are fundamental things like, hey, how do you follow up with a client in a way that also moves a deal forward, right?
Yeah.
After a meeting. Those are basics that it's applicable to any part of the job. It doesn't matter what segment or sector, what size of business you're working with. That's what I appreciate. So you talk about coaching you've gotten. Can you think about, I want to put you on the spot right now, Josh. What do you think is one of your biggest leadership failures to date? And what have you learned from it?
So the first thing I'll say, failures happen a lot, sort of my philosophy is, and like I said, as a lot of things, as cliche as it is, failure is the best teacher. And so I think if I think about my biggest failure, I don't know if it's the biggest in terms of like a mistake type failure as much as it was the most eye-opening experience for me. And it happened probably about a year ago or so, give or take. I had been dealing with a pretty sensitive situation, HR, employee services, employee relations, for a long period. It was going on 8-9 months, and was really invested in it. Had spent a ton of time, and we had a new senior vice president who joined the company, and and sort of was brought into the situation late because it needed his oversight, in terms of where it was being escalated. And I got very emotional on the call and on the meeting, and in the way that I was answering some questions, my body language, my facial expressions, and while I had been dealing with something that I felt was going on, it was very intense for me. It was I spent a lot of hours. He was very new to it. And so, I felt like the lesson I learned from it is, being too emotional and showing those emotions on calls with very senior leaders. It's okay to have emotion. It's okay to be passionate, to have intensity, but there's times where it can come off as immature. And I was a young leader, and I hadn't had as much exposure to this individual who didn't really know all of the great work I had been doing the last 8 or 9 months. And so in a matter of maybe 5 minutes, right, I now potentially stepped into the perception of, is he too young? Is he mature enough? He's a young leader. He's great. He's a high performer, but he's a little emotional, reactive in a situation like this. And so for me, that was a failure, right? Because I felt like I could have reacted better. I let my emotions get the best of me. And I think as a really good leader, you have to be neutral with certain things. And it's not to mean you have to be sort of this stonewall, poker face type individual, but knowing how to control that and how to manage that, especially with senior individuals that can then be their perception or that snap judgment of you. I think it was really eye-opening for me. And I learned from that situation, really started to, really invest in the development of how I react, both positive and negative to things, right? Showing too much excitement can also be viewed as a sign of immaturity, right? As much as it is showing too much negative, or sort of a fiery reaction. So, I don't know if it's my biggest mistake as a leader, but it definitely is one of the biggest eye-opening experience that I had, early on in my career.
Yeah, I think it's a great lesson and one thing I would argue there's like, it's not an age thing. It's not a maturity thing. Yes, sometimes if you're not as seasoned in any area, it could be any job, quite frankly, you might get a little more emotional, and, your self-acceptance, your identity is attached to your success in whatever the job might be. I've had summer jobs working in the kitchen. Oh my God. Right. Messing up. I felt like quitting after the first,
Oh yeah.
first week. And I remember my dad, he was blue collar. He pretty much said, now you know how hard it is. Well, you're
Yeah.
going to quit. And he just kind of walked away, and he's a nice guy, but he's like, oh, you're going to quit. And I'm like, man, yeah. And then, it's one of those lessons you have. It's, but I think the bigger lesson there is, like you're illustrating, is being able to look at any situation, even when you're emotionally invested, from a third party point of view,
Yeah.
right? Like looking at it as an object out there, the problem, even if you have emotional attachment to it, and being able to look at the problem neutrally and observe it and come up with options as to how to solve it. And I think that's a huge lesson I've learned too, is, hey, something's coming from up top, the management up top. What could be the motivation? Could be the intention. Look at it objectively, even though it hits you emotionally, right? You got to step back, right? You got to step back. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. Very well said.
so one more question along the lines of the professional side. What's a myth that you hear about leadership that you know now isn't true?
Yeah. There's quite a few. I think you're shielded from a lot. If you have a good manager, you're shielded from a lot as an account executive or an individual contributor, in whatever capacity you work in. And I think one of the myths is, it's easy. It's just about forecasting and managing your deals upwards, and just, letting leadership know what number you're going to hit. Right. And it's obviously so much more than that. And I never really believed it was just that, right? But there were times where it's, you go to these forecasting meetings, and, you go to these big deal huddles, and it's just a lot of question asking, right? When's it going to come in? How much is it going to close for? Not a whole lot of rolling up your sleeves and wanting to get dirty, type thing. And so that's how that myth sort of gets started, right? They just want to know when the deal's coming in. I think, that's definitely myth buster. Like that's obviously not true. Certainly not for my style, to definitely get involved in the deals. But I think the myth of, hiring is easy. You work for a world-class company. People just kind of fall in your lap. Not true at all, right?
It
We get
isn't. It's not
what?
true. It's not true. You're bursting my bubble, Josh.
Yeah, there you go. Sorry. Mythbuster number two. And while it's true, we get incredible candidates, and our recruitment team is awesome, and we do a lot to bring in the right candidates. It's hard to find talent. It's hard to recruit it. The market has become ultra competitive, with newer products, with, different types of packages that could be offered, what people find valuable. It's not just about the money anymore. It's a lot about the money, especially for salespeople, but there's other things that people care about these days: remote work, equity, what capacity are they working with different teams, and what responsibilities, and do they travel? Do they not travel? And so finding talent, in developing talent and retaining that talent, is significantly harder than you're made to believe it is, as an individual contributor. And rightfully so. You're sort of shielded from that. Your job is to focus on your business, and a good manager will shield you from sort of the struggles of headcount and maintaining headcount and turnover. But I would say those are probably two of the bigger myths that, immediately, I uncovered.
Oh. What was there anything surprising in those myths when you uncovered them? Anything that said, "Oh my God, I'm in the wrong job"?
There was a few nights where I was like, should I go back to being an IC, and just run the big deals and do that? And, you quickly, you eat your meal, you go to bed, you sort of think about it, and you're like, no, I was made to do this. This is what I'm here for. I was built for this. But, there's just moments where, you've invested a ton of time in an employee. You've done the right things, you've done the one-on-ones, you've built the personal professional relationship, and they put time on your calendar and they quit. And I think what that does to sort of your heart and mind, and it's a little bit crushing. I didn't know the level of emotional attachment I would get to the people that I was leading. And when they told me they were going somewhere else, and you immediately, you think, did I do something wrong? Was there something I could have done? What were the red flags? Was it my style, right? Is there things that you can change? And I think that sort of emotional connection and reaction that happens to that situation, I was not expecting that. And it happened a couple times pretty early on. And so I was like, wow, I'm a new leader. At the time, Ryan was just born. So she was born in December. I became a new leader on February 1st. We had just started house hunting, and I was like, oh my God, people are leaving. I'm a brand new leader. Like, what did I do?
I know I have a friend who's a leader as well, and he started being a leader first 3 weeks. For third weekend, someone calls him up and they say, "Hey, I'm quitting, I'm going to another company." And this is his first situation. He calls me, "Dave, like, what do we do about this?"
Yeah.
And I, we had a good relationship, so I go, "What'd you do, man?" He's like, "Dave, my chair's not even warm yet. I couldn't have done anything." So we had a good joke there,
Yeah.
but it's true. Like, it's not you. It truly is not you. Most of the time, it's a free market out there.
Yeah.
Right. It's a free market out there, and people have everyone has a right to and should actually go for the things that they want to go for. Right. And most of the
Absolutely.
time, it's not you. Right. If you've done everything you could.
Yeah, it's I remember when it happened, one of my, mentors at the time was like, it's the first, but it's definitely not the last, and it happens, and it's part of the business, and you look at statistics, and, you do what you can, and it's not a reason not to invest in people. It's like you said, it's just things out of your control. It could be personal circumstances. It could be the team they were on before they got you, and they had already made up their mind.
Mm-hmm.
And at the turn of the fiscal, it was just time to accept the offer,
Mm-hmm.
and so it has happened again. It's still the same sort of dagger to the heart of, was it me? But not that you get numb to it, but you understand more that it's part of the business, and you don't take it as personal.
Yeah. It's the normal order of business. It will happen, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. I do want to get a little more personal with you, and more like personal advice that
Yeah.
you'd like to give to folks listening here. To start, what's the best compliment you've ever gotten?
I'm the worst at taking compliments. It makes me uncomfortable. I like them, but there's always that awkward, like, thank you, and you smile. I don't know. I think the anything about being a good husband, a good friend, a good father, those are the important compliments. I think that matter. I think, without that, it's sort of like, what are you doing type thing. And so I think anything along those lines of, good husband, good father, good friend, are probably the best ones.
Good family man, good
Good friend.
friend. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So along those lines, then, if you were to give advice to a smart, driven college student coming out into the real world now, what would you tell them?
I would say a few things. I would say, it's okay to not know what you love to do, what you want to do. It's okay to feel like you wish you had another year back in school, and not having to get into the real world and figure out what expenses are and rent and all the things that comes with it. It's okay if you're not doing what your parents want you to do. I was very lucky that I never really sort of felt a pressure to go into one path or another. The pressure was just to get a job and start making money and paying for expenses, but there was never a pressure. And so my advice would be, it's okay to just take that job, even if it's not long-term, even if it's not what you love to do, but you're not going to learn what you love to do, what you like to do, or what you want to do if you don't accumulate all of these experiences. And so the advice really boils down to go out and experience as much as you can, whether that means traveling, whether that means taking different jobs, whether that means working a few different part-time jobs, whether that means trying to start a company, right? Accumulate this currency of experiences, which ultimately will make you that much more valuable in the marketplace. Education is important, but you get to a certain level and people really care more about your experience and how you'd approach certain situations and what skills you've acquired from those situations. And so if you're not gaining that experience, someone else is. And if you, and that's going to make it hard for you to compete. So, I know it's a few pieces of advice, but ultimately it's just go out and get that experience. Don't be afraid. Take action and just go and do it.
The currency of experiences. That's going to be part of the title, my friend. The currency of experiences.
You put me on the spot. That's the best I could think of. But I look at some of the most successful people, and they all have these really unique backgrounds. Like they've held the odd jobs from working in retail to working at a car wash to and now they're senior salespeople or any type of senior leader, just really successful entrepreneurs. And it's always these unique experiences that make them more valuable because they've done what maybe 99% of the population hasn't done. And that makes you valuable. That makes you sort of irreplaceable sometimes.
Yeah. The currency of experiences, it shapes who you are, how you think, how you approach problems, right? People who've traveled more, who've seen the world more, you just have a different level of understanding of personalities and points of view, right? Presuming you actually travel and try to live the life of a local, right?
Yeah, I'm not talking about laying on the beach in
glamping,
Mexico or south of France.
I was roughing it, glamping, right?
Yeah, if you were fortunate enough to study abroad, I did it. My wife did, and she was immersed in that culture and can speak fluent Spanish. Like that's just a skill, and even in her career as a speech therapist, she can now be a bilingual speech therapist. That makes her significantly more valuable and competitive in the marketplace versus someone who was like, I'm going to go on spring break. I'm not going to go study abroad. And so, it's not knocking people for those decisions, but you just have to know those decisions have good or bad consequences that can make you more or less valuable.
Yeah. So when you think about the legacy you want to leave, Josh, what's one thing you want to be remembered for?
I want to be remembered for sort of always being the hardest worker in the room. I want to be remembered for a lot of things, but if I had to pick one, it would be that. And I think when someone works hard or you see someone works hard, there's other characteristics that they just embody. They're authentic. They have integrity. That they're caring. They're willing to go that extra mile. And so, I've always known I'm never going to be the most athletic. I'm certainly not the tallest. I might not be the smartest, right? But I want people like, wow, that guy worked hard. He accomplished some things that I just don't know how he was able to do that other than his extreme work ethic. And I think, I like proving people wrong. And I think working hard is the way to do that, and achieving things that, no one thought you might be able to.
Hard work pays off.
Always.
Right. So second last question to you. If you were 20 years old again, what advice would you give to the 20-year-old Josh Adelsberg?
It's a good one. I'll tell you this. So I would say about making better decisions. At 20, I was, a sophomore or junior in college. I'd gotten myself into, some handfuls of situations that probably wish I didn't have, that we won't talk about today, but it comes down to making good decisions. And I think, there's a period of everyone's life where you make good decisions because you have your parents around you. You have your siblings around you, you have coaches around you, and then you enter a period where, they're still around you, but they're not as involved. And you're sort of left to make certain decisions that have good or bad consequences. And I think I went through a period of time where I made some questionable decisions that set me back, in certain things. And so, now I learned a lot from those bad decisions. And so it's not a regret for them. And I probably wouldn't even be where I am today if I didn't learn from some of those decisions. But at the same time, if 34-year-old Josh today was looking back at sort of 20-year-old Josh, I think that's what he would say to him is you got to make better decisions, and you got to surround yourself with people that make better decisions.
Yeah. Surround yourself with people who make good decisions. Right. But at the same time, like what you said, like if you didn't make those mistakes, those bad decisions,
yeah,
you wouldn't be able to make good decisions today.
Exactly. So it's that catch-22, but
it is a catch-22. Yeah. If you helicopter parented yourself, right, it wouldn't work. All right, Josh. So this is one thing I do with every guest. I give the last question to you. What question you want to ask me that I need to edit out?
That's a tough one. I would say, here's my question. You've done a few episodes of the podcast, have you changed anything of your leadership style or what you do, with your team or, your family, from things you've learned in interviewing other leaders? Is there anything you've been like, wow, I'm taking that away, I'm implementing it. That was a great piece of information.
Yeah. There's quite a few things. I think one of them is, I think when I think about the first episode I did with Dave Toonders, someone I respect a lot, it's, I don't know, life is short, right? And there's regrets. So we talked a lot about regrets, looking back, like, hey, what would you do differently? It was, I think his response was spend more time with family. And, like Dave is, he's retired, he's doing his thing now.
Yeah.
And so, coming from that perspective, and he talked about his life working in startups, in tech, and, during the heyday of the first big boom. And it really reinforces how I'm thinking about things. Like I've recently just really reevaluated, like we talk about community, the people we're around, and who do I relate to most of the time? Who do I talk to? Am I making an effort to do things like that? I reevaluated that about myself, both in my personal life, but as well as in my professional life.
Yeah.
Right. I don't want to have those regrets. Doing something like this is something I've thought about for a while, and I just, what? Let's just do it. I don't want to have this regret, right, of not doing this. And that's the regret, right? I don't want to have.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing that's sticking out from one of my interviews is just being conscious about, we talked about burnout at the beginning of this episode. So episode 5 with Kelly Wood, we talked about the prevalence of burnout in organizations and people's lives, right? And so it's not just organizations, in personal lives too. It all comes together. And you hear the word burnout so much now, people roll their eyes. Unfortunately, it's unfortunate. It's being used so much in maybe the wrong context too, but people roll their eyes to it. But it's a real thing. It's a real thing where you're
Yeah.
not just juggling, you're not just jogging, you're joggling, right? You're trying to juggle your life and you're trying to satisfy people. You don't set if you don't set boundaries well, like we're talking about at the beginning,
Yeah.
you're gonna waste yourself into the ground, right? And and I think as a leader, I have to be very conscious of that. So, for instance, right now we do want people visiting customers more, right? But my first question is to people that work with me is, talk to me about your home life right now and what's the situation. I know you have a young family, and how's your wife, how's your wife or husband going to be able to support this? And before I ask you to go on site, see this customer, I can help you cover whatever it might be. So
Yeah.
that's something I've become very conscious of, is asking, hey, before I ask you, what's the flexibility right now with your family, with your kid who's sick, right? Can you do this? So being very cautious of that. And we could still accomplish the company goals and the objectives that we're trying to hit, being empathetic and compassionate to other people.
Yeah.
So those are two things I actually picked up. You're putting me on the spot. Those are two things that, no regrets, and being compassionate to people's lives, and the prevalence of burnout.
Yeah. It's two good ones.
Yeah. So Josh, what else do you have going on? What else do you want to tell folks that you have going on right now?
Whew. There's always something going on. It's 2:00, so it means in 15 minutes the twins will probably wake up. We'll have to do a double bottle feed. Then the toddler will wake up at 2:30, 2:45. It's sunny and pretty nice out, so maybe we'll get everyone outside and just kind of what I alluded to in the beginning. Just continue to enjoy those moments. That I can have. And spend that quality time with them, and do the things that I won't be able to do probably as much when I really get back to work and back into the swing of things.
Yeah. Well, Josh, it's a good 52 minutes with you, my friend.
That's I
Flew
will take
by.
that any day with you. It's been a while since we've got to collaborate, and I think probably since my SMB days. So this was fun. Love
Yeah.
the questions, love the content you've been putting out, and hopefully we can do it again sometime.
We will, my friend, and respect to you, and good luck with the twins. And yeah, this is you're doing a full-time job as it is right now. So looking forward to seeing you back, buddy.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me.
All right.